Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Emily Baranowski, and I am Deputy Director with Phi Alpha Delta. I'd like to welcome you all to Parts of a Law School Application, which is part of our Phi Alpha Delta webinar series. Just as a reminder, since the internet is extremely busy right now with various webinars and general usage, just keep in mind that there might be times when bandwidth is an issue. Again, as I mentioned, this presentation is being recorded and will be available on the Phi Alpha Delta YouTube channel within the next few days. So please do bear with us if there are technical issues. If you have questions during this presentation, please use the question and answer feature. We will get to all of your questions at the end of the presentation and hopefully give us time to go through all of them. If you have any technical issues during this presentation, please go ahead and use the chat feature to message me directly. I am under there as Phi Alpha Delta Law Fraternity. Please let me know if you have any problems and I'll get to you as I can. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our presenters now. I'd like to introduce them before I do. First, we have Dean Jacqueline Bell, who's the Associate Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid with Charleston School of Law. Dean Bell has more than 34 years of experience in higher education. She's a grad of the University of South Carolina at Coastal Carolina. And she's also worked with Sallie Mae, representing USA funds throughout the states of North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia. So she has quite a bit of financial aid experience and has maintained several elected positions and active leadership in the financial aid associations in the Southeast. Also joining us is Darren Kettles, the Director of Admissions for Stetson University College of Law down in Florida. Darren has been with Stetson University for over 14 years now, and so he has his education from Rollins College and also has collegiate enrollment management training from the University of Southern California's Rossier School of Education. Darren is on quite a few boards and organizations, including the LSAC, the American Association of Law Schools, things like that. So we are very excited to have him and Dean Bell joining us today. I will give them an opportunity to introduce themselves a little bit more, kind of expand on their bios if they like. So I will go ahead and turn it over to them. As I mentioned, please do use that Q&A feature as you have questions, and we will get to them at the end. I will also be sharing on my screen a JD admissions checklist that Dean Bell and Darren will be referencing, so give me just a moment to get that up on my end. Alrighty. Great. All right. It's all yours.
Great. Thank you, Emily. Welcome, everyone. It's really nice to be part of this today. I know we were excited to get the invitation, and we're always happy to participate and work with Phi Alpha Delta students. I think they have a plan for their lives, and they're involved with this organization, which is an international organization. And you know, we've always spent time recruiting with Phi Alpha Delta students, and I know you know, the other panelists here has also done the same. We consistently attend the national conferences that are usually held in Washington, D.C. in the Arlington area every year. We've certainly spent time recruiting and working with Phi Alpha Delta groups in our regions to try to make sure we connect with them. So anyway, we're happy to be with you today. We've spent a little bit of time talking about what we can do to be helpful to all of you during these times. We can certainly give you hints, and we certainly want to give you some tips going into the fall, as you all might be considering. Some of you might be in situations where you're applying this next cycle. So we want to make sure we're relevant to that and give you kind of some options to consider even what it's going to be like for recruiting and the virtual kind of accommodations that we're going to have to do. Most law schools most likely won't be able to do their traditional recruiting that they've done in person, which is always such a great way to connect with all of you. So with your help and our collective kind of working together, I hopefully will be able to still connect with you all in the same way we have in the past, and still keep it personable and effective. So we did do this JD admissions checklist. It's something that we kind of worked on together to try and come up so you had something to kind of follow along with us. I mean, it's certainly not rocket science putting together a law school application. You just want to make sure it's a good one, right? And, we can certainly add our anecdotal stuff and our suggestions and tips to put together the strongest application you can. So not only you get the choices that you're looking for, but to get the opportunities that you want and ways to strengthen it as you go along. So, Jackie, did you want to say anything before we get started with this checklist at all?
Just echo what you said about working with P.A.D and all the potential laws applicants and hopefully students and that sort of thing. And along with my financial aid background, I've been in law school admissions for about 10 years now. So glad to be here and a part of this world, and happy to be here with all of you today and get started on the checklist.
Great. So, okay, well, hopefully you can just kind of follow along. I know Emily suggested about questions. We probably want to have at least 20 minutes or so at the end to make sure we can address your specific questions. We'll have our contact information as well. So if you wanted to reach out to us in general, I certainly want to help you get into law school if that's what your goal is, whether you come to our law schools or others. There's over 200 ABA accredited law schools in the country. So hopefully, we can help you secure what you're looking for. So just starting with the first one, starting a law school application, probably for a lot of you, you're at different stages of your kind of academic career. Some of you could be just going into college, or some of you could be rising seniors and in between too. So regardless, whether you are one of these students that actually decided they wanted to go to law school at the very beginning of your college career, or you decided throughout, it doesn't matter. I mean, so starting with the Law School Admissions Council. So it's the parent organization for anyone applying to any ABA accredited law schools in the country. As I said, there's well over 200, well, just over 200 rather, ABA accredited law schools. So, for some of you, you're going to be looking at a lot of different places. Some of you might want to stay closer to home. Some of you might have some reach schools. Some of you might know already where you want to target. So, but you still have to go through the Law School Admissions Council, lsac.org. It's on that checklist for you too. So if you haven't visited that website, by all means, it's a great resource. It's a multitude of resources for you as students, for us as law school admissions officers, for pre-law advisors actually can use that and gain material and information for you all to share. So, so if you visit that website, you'll realize that, they write and administer. So the Law School Admissions Council writes and administers the law school admissions test. And now it's offered 9 times a year. So this was the first year. Last year was the first year they offered it up 9 times there, or it could be this year. But anyway, it was 4 for a while, then it went to jump to 6, and now it's up to 9 times a year. So hopefully during, with that schedule, it'll allow you to take the LSAT in your time and place when you're ready, rather than trying to rush to our schedule. So hopefully that'll be helpful for you. So when you visit that website, there's a number of things you can do there. So you have to register. So they write and administer the LSAT, and you also have to register for whatever one you plan to take, and you can do those well in advance, but there are cutoff dates, so usually about a month out. So if you plan to take the LSAT, think about when you might do it and realize that you have about a month prior to register for that test, but you want to check with LSAT to get that as well. So also, so when you get to that website, you're going to look at what the opportunities are to take the LSAT. So a lot of people, the score band, if you don't know, is a 120 through a 180. Every law school has a certain median they like to report. They also report the 25th to the 75th percentile as well. So look at like that score band range and see, where you are and what law schools potentially you could be competitive with too. And of course, everything's relative to the applicant pool, so you never know. So don't automatically assume that you aren't competitive for a school from year to year, because even though they report their medians and stuff. So, but look at those. And on the LSAC website, you can actually probably plug in your current score if you haven't taken it, or what you've been practice testing at. You can kind of see which law schools in the country, ABA accredited law schools, that you might have a very good chance of gaining admission and hopefully scholarship as well. So did you want to say anything about the LSAT, Jackie? I will spend a little more time on this number 1 bullet, but I just want to make sure that you didn't want to jump in right now.
Yeah, just remember that I always refer to LSAC as the big warehouse in the sky, if you will. I mean, that's where everything goes. You'll complete, not only sign up and get your account set up there, register to take the LSAT, but all of your admission applications and everything, your letters of recommendation and all the things that we're going to talk about later, all go to LSAC. So they sort of gather up all that information and then they bundle it up and send it to all schools electronically. I think the other thing about the LSAT is to, make sure you give yourself plenty of time to prepare. Don't take it just off the cuff. There are different opportunities to help you with the LSAT prep. LSAC has the Khan Academy, so I would keep that in mind. And that's probably about it, that I would add at this time.
Yeah, sure. So, as Jackie even said too, it is a big clearinghouse. So they manage 40,000 plus applicants to law schools, probably more than that, varies from year to year. So, I mean, they're really a wonderful organization. So if you have questions, the phone number is actually on this checklist. So reach out to them. If you wanted to talk about potential, if somebody needs some type of accommodations to take the LSAT, for example, say you need, something based on, just your learning style. If, a lot of those things, you'd have to go to this website and there's a way to do it. You can actually get accommodations for that. If somebody is going through financial hardships, for example, at the LSAC website, it's a hard time for you and your family, given our current lives right now, you might be in a situation where you might have to apply for a fee waiver, for example. So you have to fill out a form on their website and submit it. So don't be, feel bad about any of that. I mean, I encourage people all the time. I mean, take advantage of these kinds of resources and opportunities. So if you have further questions about that, by all means, you can certainly reach out to us. Jackie and I will share our information at the end to help you with that. So in terms of, that's about the LSAT. I mean, Jackie kind of hit on a little bit about prep classes. There are a number. If you don't know in your area, I think it's always fine to reach out to your local law school and find out if there's like a local person that does something that might be helpful for you. There's a lot of online opportunities. Some people do private tutors. But, figure out how you learn and find the right person to help you get the kind of scores that you're looking for. The LSAT is a skills-based test, so there's really no shortcut. So don't think that you can just take it for, practice for a few tests and then you're ready. I mean, and Jackie could probably echo this, that I've never really seen anyone that goes into it blindly that's really done well or got to their potential. So when you think about the LSAT, use it as a tool to help you maybe fund your education. So the higher the LSAT, sometimes that can translate into higher scholarship for you. So we've all upped our scholarship budgets probably at most law schools. So if you're considering them, find out what those ranges are. And, some schools will offer up to full tuition scholarship, some, half tuition, some, just a few thousand up to full tuition. So know what that is. And if you take the LSAT once and you think that you can improve your score, you can always apply, but you could get a decision, you could get scholarship, but then you could also say, okay, why don't I retake it and then request reconsideration based on my score improving a few points? And I think you do that at your school as well, Jackie, right?
Right. And I think most schools now take the higher score. And when people ask me, should I take the test again? My response is, if you think you can do better, yes. Prepare and take it again, because I think most schools don't frown on that. I mean, we want you to be at your best potential. And, you never know. I always tell people, too, to allow enough time to take it twice, because you don't know the day you wake up to go take that test, you could not feel well. You could get some bad news, that sort of thing. So take advantage of that. And one of the other things I was going to I know we'll probably touch on at some point, but now the LSAT is being given, remotely, from your home and proctored remotely. And so there's some pointers on the website about how the new LSAT, they call it Flex, LSAT Flex works. So I would certainly take advantage of, once again, lsac.org, their website. It's got a wealth of information out there about that.
Yeah, so that's a really good point too. So we wanted to talk about the LSAT Flex too, because we don't really know what the fall is going to look like. They've determined for the remainder over the summer, any of the LSATs, so both the June and July and the previous May test, which they actually infused in, it wasn't even part of the schedule. So they did that as a reaction to what was going on with COVID. So both June and July are Flex, and they haven't made any announcements for the fall that I'm aware of what they're planning to do, whether they're going to be in person or not. But, plan for both. But for some reason, I've heard some feedback from students that talked about how that they found that when they took the flex, it was a little bit more challenging than the one they actually took in person. And, we did talk about that. But, when I talked to LSAC and Giselle and some of the, the administrators that are working directly with schools, they assured us that they're the same style of questions. There's actually only 3 sections to the test. So as opposed to the typical one in person is 4 sections, and then there's a writing sample. So with the Flex, there's 3 sections, there's no beta test, and there's no writing sample. So that's sort of the difference. But we, and Jackie and I talked with other admissions officers, and we don't really aren't planning to look at the LSAT Flex any different than we are the regular LSAT for reporting purposes. So reported a little bit different on your CAS report because there is sort of a notation with that. But our purposes so far, we have not taken anything different when it comes to the Flex versus an in-person LSAT score. So just if you're thinking about that and if there is a difference, sometimes people find it helpful to be in their own space and taking it in familiar territory and not worry about interacting with others. So, and the quietness of the room and stuff. So it has advantages. So, that's on the LSAT. We could certainly address more questions if you have them more specifically. Jackie did mention about the CAS report as well. So when you go to the lsac.org website, in order to compile your online application, you will have to set up this CAS report, which is your credit assembly service. And that's really your account for which you'll funnel in all your components. And we're going to get to those other components now. If you do plan to submit an application to any law school once they open, some law schools open September 1st, some open October 1st. So check with each law school to see where you stand in terms of submitting an earlier application. But you can always submit your application even when you are waiting for an LSAT. So don't think that you have to have the score before you can submit an application. As an applicant, your score will automatically come to our school once those scores post, and we will get those updated to the transfer platform for which they use. It's called ACES2. So just know that. So, but it's part of the strategy and talking to individual law schools about what they do and what they recommend. So by all means do that. So the CAS report, so that is one of the earlier things. If you have things that you can funnel in, if you want to order that, those kinds of things, just know it's set up and it's the way you're going to start compiling. So Jackie, do you want to start with like the next one about the application, and we'll just kind of.
I think we've already hinted at it, but all the applications are available at LSAC's website. So that's where you'll go to start the process. You'll find they use what's called a flex app. So there's a standard section of the application, which is standard to any law school. So things like your name and address and those types of things, you only have to input once. When I first started in admissions, and Darren, if you can relate to this too, if you applied to 10 different schools, you had to write your name or type your name 10 different times. So they've actually streamlined the application where you don't have to do that type of thing anymore. And then there's a school-specific section for each school, so they may ask different types of questions. So that's what you'll see. You need to make sure with each school, what their deadlines are, when their application becomes available, and what their deadlines are for submission. People often say, do I need to submit my application earlier? Am I more advantaged? Once again, most law schools probably are more alike than they are different, but these are the types of questions that vary from school to school. So if you're looking at 3 or 4 different schools, then you want to make sure you know what their rules are about the application. I would recommend answering all the questions that apply to you. Occasionally I'll see an application that may say see attachment, which maybe is referring to their resume or something like that. And then when you get to that attachment, you loaded it wrong and it's a blank sheet of paper. So we don't know any more about you now than we did before. So make sure you're thorough, answer all the questions, and make sure all your documents and everything are loaded properly.
Good. So yeah, I'll just say one thing about that too. When you're completing a law school admissions application in general, your life really comes on display. So all these applications at every law school, they're all written by attorneys. They try to encompass every, possible scenario that we could potentially ask for you, because you want to make sure in a lot of ways that your law school admissions application will mirror your bar application. So you don't want variables. So it has to be very thoughtful. This is a professional school application. There's a professional school expectation that you will be thorough and accurate to the best of your ability. It's kind of like a contract that you sign. So if you complete your application and you submit it, basically you're attesting that everything is true and accurate.
Okay, I'll just kind of follow up to Darren comes back in. So what he was alluding to is that your application has to mirror your bar application, and so you want to make sure everything is accurate, and that, you know, everything is disclosed. We'll at some point, you know, part of the application is your character and fitness. Sometimes people are a little leery of, you know, telling law schools some of the maybe incidents that they incurred maybe while they were in college, and you know, they're sort of ashamed and not proud of those things, but those things have to be disclosed to the law school. I often tell folks that even if your mother doesn't know your secret, you have to tell the law school. So we may know things about you that others do not, but you don't want to be in the situation of when you get to completing your bar application that it doesn't match, because most states will require a copy of your application to be submitted with your bar application. So that's why it's so critical that everything match, you know, schools attended, jobs and that sort of thing. Everything needs to match. I think we lost Darren, so I'm just going to go ahead to the next part of the application process.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead, Jackie, and I'll make sure, I'll see if we can get him back in. So okay. Yeah, you go ahead and I'll work with him. So sorry about that.
So we'll move on to transcripts being the next part. You have to submit all your post-secondary transcripts to LSAC through the CAS service. So you want to make sure that, you know, even if you went to a community college, all those things have to be sent to LSAC. And what they do, so that you're not surprised when you see what your GPA that LSAC is calculated, we see every transcript, and we can see your grade trends, we can see, you know, the ups and downs, that sort of thing. So the thing about the transcripts is if you went to a community college and you went to maybe say two post-secondary schools to get your bachelor's degree, they will combine every course that you've ever taken. They will take your grades from all those courses, even if it's a case where a grade's been forgiven or replaced. If you've taken a class twice, every class that you've ever taken and grade that you've earned up until you receive your first bachelor's degree will be recalculated by LSAC. So when we get your CAS report, we'll see not only what your degree summary GPA is, so the degree that, you know, wherever you earned your degree, we'll see what your GPA is there. But we'll also see that other GPA, and that cumulative undergraduate GPA is what we're required by the American Bar Association to post when we post our statistics. So, and the other thing about transcripts is whichever university conferred your degree, you have to send that copy also to LSAC. And if you're one of those students who maybe is finishing in the summer and won't have your degree until August, then that degree granting transcript has to be on file with the law school and LSAC no later than October 1st of your year of enrollment. So keep that in mind as well. We'll move on to letters of recommendation. Almost all, I don't know of any law school who doesn't require letters of recommendation. What will vary is the number, the minimum, and the maximum that that each school requires. So once again, just be aware of how many they require. It'll be in their application as you're going through the application process. You'll know, and you'll know ahead of time too, so you're going to know how many to request. You need to use their letter of recommendation service through LSAC, through the CAS service. That's where everything goes. Once again, they're that big warehouse in the sky. So all of those letters of recommendation, your recommender has to send it directly to LSAC. You cannot yourself submit the letter of recommendation. And I often tell students you need to make sure you get good letters of recommendation, and that may sound sort of funny, I guess, but we often get letters sometimes that are very vague, or I can remember one that I use always as an example is I got this letter one time that said, well, when he went to class, he was a good student. So what does that really mean? Does that mean he didn't go to class on a regular basis? Or, you know, the way that was worded, it was a really awkward, you know, letter of recommendation, if you will. So often say, make sure they're good letters of recommendation. If you've recently graduated, most schools want to see at least one of their letters of recommendation from academia. We want those recommenders to be people who really know you, who can speak to your work ethic, to your classroom ethics, that can address you as a person and what your values are. Sometimes we'll get that letter from, you know, the judge or from your congressman, and basically they'll just say, you know, that you live in their district or from their state, or, you know, that you went to XYZ university, and those are things we already know. So we really want to know from these letters of recommendation can speak directly to you and actually, once again, know who you are. And, you know, just be careful and don't feel shy about letting your recommender know what it is you're wanting him to, you know, point out in the letters of recommendation. You know, sometimes people want some guidance on what you're looking for. And if you've asked someone to do a letter of recommendation for you and they keep putting you off and hesitating, that may be an indication that they're not really comfortable or don't want to write the letter. So it may end up being not a letter that you would want to be submitted. And that you need to make sure that they write. Sometimes people will write about, you know, I'm recommending XYZ to, you know, ABC University. Well, that letter came, you know, is coming to me, and I'm not ABC University. So you need to make sure that they're, you know, aware of all the various schools if you're applying to various ones. And so when you start personalizing them like that, it can be a little dangerous when people are recommending you for a law school that, and it's not the law school that, you know, reading that letter of recommendation. So, guess we're still working on Darren. I'm sure he'd have some things to contribute. We'll move on to personal statements and resumes. I think the personal statement is probably, you know, applicants say is probably the most difficult and most time-consuming part of the application. So you do have to upload your statement to the CAS account. It'll be a part of the application that you would submit. Check with your school to see if they have a specific subject or topic that they want you to write about. Also, find out if they want it, as we've got listed here. Sometimes people want it limited to 2 or 3 pages. They want it double spaced because we're reading a lot electronically. And so, you know, if you cram a lot on you know, just one page and it's single spaced and a small font, then it may be very difficult for us to, you know, read that after a while if you're reading hundreds of applications, you know, on a daily basis. So keep that in mind. So your personal statement is really your opportunity, I think, to shine, to show your passion and desire about law school, about why you want to go to law school, to talk about really what a wonderful person you are and why I would want you in a seat versus someone else. I often tell them in sessions like this, you know, I think sometimes it's hard for us to talk about how wonderful we are and that sort of thing, but if you can't think of anything and don't have really a starting point if you need an idea, I often say ask your friends, ask your mother or your father or your grandparents. I'm sure there's a whole list of things, of qualities about you that they can list, and you can use that as a starting point for your personal statement. But once again, some schools do have specific topics, so you want to make sure you cover those. So that's about all I have for personal statements. There are some, you know, you can go online. There's various hints. I know on our website we have hints. I'm sure Mr. Kettles' website does as well. The resume is another part, and it sort of some schools require a resume, some schools don't. Here we strongly recommend that you submit a resume. And once again, it goes through the CAS account. It's a part of the application itself. And you want to use your resume. You want to tailor it to, I think, law school admission. You don't necessarily have to have an objective. Many times I'll see a resume that says that they're looking for a sales or marketing position. And I often think, you know, you're submitting to the wrong person because I don't have those positions open. So we're going to pause here and get Darren back on.
Thanks for your patience, guys. Give me just 1 minute so we can get Darren back here. So I'm going to pause the screen. But Jackie, if you want to go ahead and keep chatting, do feel free because we can get him up just a sec.
So you want to use your resume, like I say, tailor it towards law school admission. You don't even have to have an objective, but it's your opportunity, I think, to expand and give more details than maybe the application has room for. So you can go in more detail about what, if you've held positions and jobs, what, you know, what those roles you played there and what your actual duties were. You do want to make sure that it's complete, that the employment section and everything is complete and matches your law school application. And also, once again, the bar application is going to be looking at all these documents to make sure that everything matches. So you want to make sure you include everything there. So we still don't have it.
Just a moment. Sorry, guys. There's, as I mentioned at the beginning, there's a lot going on the internet right now. This does happen from time to time. So
right. So well, I'm just going to proceed on then. I don't think I have much more to add about the resume. As far as the addenda is concerned, many schools allow you to attach an addendum for various reasons. A lot of times you may want to address your GPA if you feel like your GPA or your LSAT score is not representative of who you really are and your abilities. Then take advantage, if a law school allows you to submit a GPA or LSAT addendum, then I would take advantage of that and explain, you know, if there's some you don't want it to be long, drawn out. You don't want it to be, you know, like, you know, certainly not making excuses, but, you know, grade fluctuations, those sort of things. Sometimes people who play sports, you can see the grade fluctuations. You know what sport they're playing based on how their grades look. Sometimes, you know, you may have encountered an illness. You may have a family member that's been ill and you've had to take on some extra duties with them, or it's affected you. Maybe you've had a, you know, a loss, a death in the family, that sort of thing. So you would want to use these addendums as an opportunity to address any of those types of issues. Also, many schools allow you to submit a diversity addendum. So if there's anything there that you feel like that you bring diversity to the class, or you've encountered that in your life, so you could certainly submit an addendum for that. Also with the law schools, there's a character and fitness section on the application, and it's where we ask questions about academic, whether you've ever been disciplined, if you've ever been on academic probation, that sort of thing, if you've ever had any traffic or any sort of arrest or charges, even if you weren't found guilty, you have to submit an addendum to address any of those items that you would answer yes to. So once again, the character and fitness section is very vital and important in that it must match when you get to that part of completing the bar application. Sorry, Darren, we are all the way through to the addenda.
Oh, wow. Look at you. I know, I've really tried. In all my times doing these, I have never had where I couldn't just zip right back in. So I apologize. I left you all hanging, but you were in very good hands with Jackie. I know that for sure.
So we're in number 6 now.
number 6 too. I don't know if you I just wanted to make sure, going back to number 3 with transcripts, and a lot of people in other live streams that I've done too, I didn't know if we addressed the pass-fail thing that has come up a lot. Did you address that?
We did not talk about pass-fail. We talked about transcripts, the cumulative undergraduate GPA, having to have the degree conferred to transcript, that sort of thing. But
okay,
we did not talk about pass-fail.
Okay, yeah, let's maybe just address that, because it's come up a little bit, and I know a lot of you probably have been impacted pass-fail too. So, for students that are like rising seniors, sometimes, the overall kind of GPA fluctuation with a pass-fail probably won't make that much of a difference. But if you're early in your academic career, you may want to think about that too. And oftentimes with your individual schools, you have a choice whether, if you're taking 5 classes, maybe you can do 2 pass-fail, or you have a choice, right, of how many you want to do pass-fail or not. It's kind of a hard one to always advise everyone collectively, but I just wanted to say what my thoughts were surrounding that. So with LSAC, when I've had conversations with them about the pass-fail, a pass doesn't impact a grade or your overall GPA. A fail would. So you want to think about that. So, if we see somebody that has a transcript where they have like 3 pass-fails, or 3 passes, and then maybe 2 with grades, I mean, would it automatically make us seem like, the grades they took, maybe they got A's, but if you took the pass, maybe you weren't getting A's in those classes? So we're going to know that, right? But I don't want you to feel that, you're not collectively in a group like that understands that. I always think of as a P has the equivalent of maybe a C grade. People would think differently, but if it's a good rule of thumb to think about a pass being maybe a C or an average. So if you have grades higher than that aren't going to impact your overall GPA, I mean, be strategic about it. And individual law schools, hopefully I'm happy to have those conversations with people about, what they should do, because I know it's brought some anxiety for some students, especially leaving mid-semester, this past semester, and then having to make that determination whether they're going to do pass-fail. So just sort of keep that in mind. I think if you are in a situation of why you chose to do a pass-fail versus taking the actual grades, if you have that option, you may want to include that in an addenda. And I know Jackie was on to number 6, so I kind of thought maybe just trying that pass-fail in to maybe an addenda option could be something, just to sort of bring sort of some understanding of why you did that. But we can always have those conversations too. So I think I overheard a little bit what Jackie was saying with the addenda, so I don't know. I mean, it's really a part where you get to explain something that really isn't another part in your application where there's no real space to do that. So, if you want us to know something, share it. It doesn't have to be pages. I mean, we have to read them all, so I don't need 3 pages to tell me something simple. So, but just think about that. It's on a need to know. If you don't explain it, maybe we'll come up with our own reasons of why you had a bad semester. I think it's better off to use your own, experience of what happened during that time. So, so 7 and 8, the application fees, some schools have them, some don't. Some will waive them for you, some won't. So, think about that. I always got the mindset, it's like, well, I mean, what harm could it be to ask? If somebody asks me, typically I'll waive it. I have no problem doing that. I mean, it's certainly not supposed to be an area to obstruct your ability to be able to apply. We want to make sure that you can apply to the schools you want. So reach out. I mean, I don't know. We have an application fee, but many don't pay it. So just keep that in mind. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Jackie.
Yeah. Once again, many schools do different things. I mean, we actually waive the fee on LSAC's website, so we don't issue the fee waivers, but I know many schools that do. And so just, it's really knowing your school, doing your research, and all of that, I think most of the time is on their website if they have fee waivers.
Exactly.
Reach out to those schools if they don't reach out to them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So if somebody does apply for, for example, like an LSAC or a CAS waiver or something like that, those automatically give you fee waivers for most schools too. So keeping that in mind, if you're going through some type of financial hardship or anything impacted with COVID, by all means, consider that. I know I mentioned it earlier. automatically generate law school kind of waivers for most law schools, but you'd have to check. So, where are we with timing? I want to make sure. I know I see some questions pop up in the chat feature, in the Q&A section down below, and I know we're going to try and work towards getting that. The bottom one, number 8, is, and we did kind of address any type of amendment. So when you submit an original application, and in a perfect example this year, we had a student, he was a veteran student too, and I got to know him really quite well too, but he reached out after getting some information and learning that maybe there were some things that he should have further disclosed in an application. It's one of those things, then we have to require everything. It is an amendment to the application once you submit something. I've had people say, I submitted a personal statement, but I left in the other school inside the statement that I said I was really excited to go to that school and not your school, and I didn't change that out. We can't remove it. You can add another personal statement, but we can't remove that. So it's an amendment to your application. So just be careful when you hit send that everything is clear and accurate for that school. Don't be like leaving, that law school in a personal statement for which you're not even applying. You're applying to other schools. I mean, it really is kind of off-putting for schools to read that you're excited to go somewhere other than where you're applying. So just be thoughtful about that. But this particular student, he had a litany of things that he didn't disclose, and then it has to go back for reconsideration. Our question is, if we would have known then what we know now with the full disclosure, would we still have admitted that student? And it's kind of an integrity question too. You're entering professional or a profession that is going to require that. And when you submit something, we believe it's accurate, but then keep in mind that if there is an amendment, it could go back to reconsideration based on committees too. So keep that in mind as you do that. So amendments are important. If you have to make them, sometimes people find out that I didn't know something was on my student conduct code when I got caught for underage drinking in the dorm with my friends. It's like, well, check your student conduct code records at your school. Check your DMV in your school. Check your credit at your, like these credit agencies. Know what's out there on you, because your whole life is going to come on display when you apply to law school. So we would highly recommend that. Jackie, if you have any thoughts surrounding that.
Agree with everything. One other thing to also remember, that once you submit an application, if something happens after that time, you have to notify the school. So if you get that underage drinking, or if you get, a speeding ticket, you have to amend your application with the schools that you've applied to. So just keep that in mind, and just be careful, so that hopefully you don't have to do those amendments.
I know you all have big plans for your lives. Don't do anything that's going to somehow prevent you from getting there. There's a lot of temptations out there, but make good choices. Ask yourself, am I making the best choice here if I'm doing this? Like, I'm going to hang out with friends, although there's probably little of that going on right now, maybe virtual, and then nobody's running into problems. Because everyone's, these virtual problems probably aren't happening for you. But hopefully when we get back to some normalcy, you have big plans for your lives, make good choices, because you don't want anything to come back and impede your plans. So anyway, so that's the checklist. Sorry I didn't participate in everything, but I know you're in good hands, as I said. So, but Emily, are there questions that maybe we can address to the attendees? I know there's a number of them, so we want to do that.
Yeah, there's a few of them. And if it's okay with everyone, I'm going to stop the share just so that I can moderate the questions a little easier. But I do want to remind everyone that when you signed up for this webinar, the email I sent today, I did include this checklist. So it is in your email, and we'll follow up with it again too. But for now, we'll stop sharing so that we can kind of go into some of these questions. I'm going to start with one of our first questions, and this particular student is a junior this fall, so they're just ending their sophomore year, going into junior year. They indicate that they've been kind of a bad test taker, even though they perform well in school. And they're asking your opinion if they should take the LSAT course and the LSAT this year to have an extra year in case they do poorly, or if, in your opinion, they should just wait until their senior year. Also, as kind of a follow-up to that, if they do take the LSAT a few times, does the highest score automatically get considered, or do they see all the scores?
Sure. Well, I'll jump in, and Jackie can chime in then. So as a junior, knowing that you already want to go to law school, we love that, because planning is better and there's not rush. So scores, LSAT scores are good for 5 years. So, I mean, it's a skills-based test. So most people improve over time as they get more confidence, as their timing gets better, as they understand what's expected of them on the test. So if you get a chance to do it this year, give yourself that extra time. And I really see no kind of downside to taking the LSAT in your junior year. I do think that it does give you a chance to sort of re-strategize as you go along. I mean, and depending on your experience, I mean, I always ask students, even when they are even admitted, and I'm sure Jackie does too, it's like, well, do you think you can improve your score? And, you know, I think a lot of people say, well, you know, I think I could. I mean, these tests are quite demanding. They're a little miserable. We get that, but it is a means for you to go to law school. But try and use it as a tool to not only get you admitted to law school, but again, as to help fund your legal educations too. So I'm a big proponent of starting earlier than later and leaving your senior year. If you can secure an LSAT score in your junior year, that's going to give you, you know, the opportunities you seek. I mean, if you retake it again and maybe you get the same score or you go down, I mean, we will see everything, but we will report the highest score. And these scores uphold standards of brands of law schools. So we report medians and all those things. So, but we do see everything. So yeah, I get started. Get started. Take away some of the anxiety. Don't leave everything to your senior year. There's enough going on in your senior year. I'm a big fan if you are entering junior and you want to do that. So, Jackie?
So just, I would be aware of the number of times that in your lifetime that you can take the LSAT. Just be aware of that. And I, too, am a proponent, if you think you can do better, to take it over, also starting early. But, and sometimes we see, I saw it this year, and I think it was because the LSAT was given so many times, people just took it in, you know, January, and then they took it in February. You probably haven't had enough time in that 1 month to really improve and prepare. So I would be cognizant of the timing of when you do it and making sure you're ready to take that test. But taking it in your junior year probably is absolutely fine.
Yeah, and Jackie did mention that whole 3-5-7 thing. So you can take it, you know, 3 times in a 2-year period. I think it's 5 times in, I don't know, 5 year. I know it's 7 times in a lifetime. So
Right.
God forbid any one of you has to do that. But you know, it is just a requirement. I mean, probably 99% of law schools are using the LSAT as an admissions requirement. We don't typically ever waive them, regardless if people have PhDs or whatever. I mean, we don't waive them. So it is the standard part of the process and is used by the majority of law schools to bring in their admitted classes. So hopefully that helps. What's next, Emily?
Awesome. Well, we do have quite a few questions, so I'm going to combo a few of them here to kind of get the most bang for our buck. These next 2 questions are specifically about the writing samples. First, how much weight does that LSAT writing sample hold? And since the LSAT Flex doesn't have a writing sample, this questioner wants to know if they should request the writing sample separately or if it's not even necessary. I think that kind of ties in with the weight question there.
Jackie, why don't you go ahead?
I feel like that our admission committee actually reads and looks at that writing sample. Our admission committee is composed of course, I read all files, but the admission committee is composed of 5 faculty members. So I feel like that it's certainly an important part to them. And for me, I think it's more of, you know, if I've got 5 applications and everybody's equal, if, you know, then your writing sample could be one of those things that, you know, makes or breaks you. You could put you ahead of someone else. That's about all I have for writing samples. I think sometimes, especially the way the writing sample used to be, sometimes you couldn't even read them because, you know, you only have a limited amount of time after you've taken all the other portions of the test, and people were really hurried and sometimes never even finished the entire, you know, their writing. And so I think there's probably a mix out there, but I mean, I think it does have some value in Otherwise, it wouldn't have been a part of the application in the beginning.
I probably don't disagree with anything. It is a separate part that you can do, and after you submit an application, the writing sample can come in. I don't know what every law school is doing if they're waiting for that writing sample to come in before they actually are willing to view it and even make a recommendation about admission. I think you can have an application complete, but I have to talk to the file processor about that. But yeah, it is one of those things that I've seen it work well. I mean, as Jackie said, the previous way that it was done during the actual test. I mean, some people would just write things. They would just draw a happy face, and they wouldn't really use it for anything. And so, I mean, have I seen it used effectively? Yes. And it is a part of the application process. So I would think that you should respect every part of the process, including the writing sample, and make sure that it is the best of your ability.
We have quite a few questions too on GPA and grades. So I'll cover a few of the topics that people specifically asked about. Should we be concerned if we have a low GPA, but just being involved in activities help balance that? In the line of pass-fail, if a school is not offering credit, would that count as a fail? How important is GPA? When you're looking at some of this stuff, especially lately with the COVID-19 crisis, and we're moving to such a pass-fail situation, how does pass-fail impact what you guys are looking at now? And then how does that feed into how you would normally look at GPA and that overall process? Darren, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, sure. And I don't know if the question came in before I even addressed some of the pass-fail, because I do think it's on the minds of current college students right now, where they're having to grapple a little bit with the whole pass-fail thing within individual schools. Some schools, and even some law schools, all they did was give pass-fail for students that were in mid-semester this past spring semester, and some law schools, they just gave pass-fail. Which, there was mixed reviews on that. So, but for undergrads, especially if you're earlier in your career, I don't know if it's going to fully impact you greatly. As I said earlier, you do sometimes have the option at individual schools where you have, if you took 5 classes, you could have sort of a bifurcated kind of pass-fail with some grades. Some people might take all passes just because it doesn't impact your overall cumulative GPA with LSAC, as they do the assessment of overall GPAs. They determine GPAs that are reported to not only law schools in your CAS report, but what's reported to the ABA and US News and some of these other things. So that's what we use. Some students kind of talked about, well, when we went midstream in this past spring semester, and when we went virtual, some faculty members were just better at continuing the class format and the students received a similar education for them. But some said that the faculty member wasn't really great with the technology. I felt like, things sort of stopped for them, where they didn't get like the same kind of education they did at the beginning part of the semester as they did towards the end when everything went virtual. So those pass-fail things too, every school is going to have to deal with them because they're impacted by them now. It's an integral part of, the undergraduate curriculum right now. So I don't think they're deal breakers for any people, but be strategic about it too. So make sure you're always looking in your best interest too. So, if you are unsure about what kind of grades that you are going to get, I think you should be talking to your faculty for that class and seeing the kind of grades. But if it's going to bolster a GPA, why wouldn't you take the grade versus taking the pass-fail? If you're uncertain about something, a pass would be fine. I think we haven't seen that many on transcripts right now, so it's kind of a little bit uncharted territory for us to potentially be considering those for the new cycle. We're seeing, of course, some of them roll in right now, but for a lot of people that were seniors, when you have a pass-fail and you're so close to the end of your collegiate career, your grades don't really fluctuate that much. Even if you got all A's in your last semester, if you had a 3.9 maybe and you got all A's in your last semester, it probably wouldn't go up to a 4.0, it would probably be like a 3.93 or 9.4 or something. So they don't really fluctuate all that much. So I think it would have, little impact if you're a rising or a senior that just graduated, or even a rising senior, depending on what fall. So what are your thoughts on pass-fail? Jackie, do you have anything you want to add? I can certainly I would be willing to have individual conversations about that with students because I think it's really on their minds.
Right. I don't have anything to add. I think it's it's a part of this new territory, and not only our students, current students here at our law schools are also grappling with those same things. Do I take the pass fail or do I take the grades and that sort of thing. So it's been very interesting to me to see what students have chosen, and so we don't want our students unfairly looked at when it comes to jobs and things like that. So I don't think that you're going to find law school admissions people unreasonable, but I think, like Darren said, you just need to be strategic and really think about what you're doing and don't just take pass because it's the easy thing to do. But just also remember the F hurts you. And I think part of that other question was how important is GPA. I think if any law school admissions person is honest with you, I mean, LSAT and GPA are important factors of the application. I think most of us do read the application holistically, but those are numbers that we have to report, and that's how we're measured by you when you start looking at law schools, what our LSATs and GPAs are. So they do play an important role, and I don't think you should downplay them. And once again, if you have some disparity between your LSAT and your GPA, or there's been issues with your GPA, as I mentioned when I was, Darren, when you were out, if you were maybe had a sickness or a death or, something like that, or you played a sport and it impacted, some of your grades and that sort of thing, let the school know that. Let them know that in those addendums that you can submit.
I think that's really good advice. Just because a law school reports a certain median for example, the GPA. I mean, I had a student call the other day too, and she was really concerned. She had a 2.9 GPA, and our median was probably closer to, it's into the 3.4 ranges too. But she also had a really good LSAT, so she had like a 159 or 160 LSAT. And so, I don't want you to think that you're uncompetitive. Once grades are done, there's really nothing you can do about them. Even if you retake like a class, say for example in your undergraduate career you took algebra and you got a C first, but then you took it again and you got a B. LSAT, while it's going to reflect in your individual school that you did get that B, when you turn those grades into LSAC, they do the calculation of the average. So it'll be a C+ that you would get for that algebra class that you retook. So just be aware that there could be a difference, because sometimes, students are surprised when you submit an application and I tell them what the CAS report says about their GPA, and it's like, oh, well, my GPA is a 3.6, and I was like, well, on the CAS report it says it's a 3.47. So, I just want you to know that there could be a discrepancy, and we always, as law schools, we defer to the LSAC calculation of the GPA rather than the individual undergraduate school that we use. And we don't use graduate education grades in terms of the overall cumulative GPA. So if you have a low GPA, don't think, oh, I'll just get a graduate degree and they'll combine all those GPAs together. They don't do that. So just know that. Is there anything else? Emily, do we have time for one more question, or we have to, what do you think?
Yeah, I think we've got time for a few more, assuming that you guys are willing to stay on. I will do my best to combo some of these, like I said. And then as a reminder for everyone too, we will follow up with everyone's contact info. So if we don't get to your question today, it doesn't mean we didn't like it, just that we did run short on time. So one thing I would like to direct you guys is regarding letters of recommendation, because there were a few questions about that. And specifically, people wanted to know if it's okay or preferred to have one from an employer or a supervisor in addition to academic letters of recommendation. One of the examples someone used was that they're a resident assistant and their community director knows their character well. So that was a question. And then someone also asked for the letter recommendations if the recommender would have to submit it directly through the LSAC and how they would do that. Jackie, do you want to start with that one? Yeah.
Yeah, and part of that we covered under the letters of recommendation. So yes, I'll start with that piece first. Your recommender has to submit it through LSAC. There's instructions about their letter of recommendation service, about how those letters are submitted. So when you get into this application process and you start looking at LSAC's website and what's involved with CAS and stuff like that, all of those, how to get that letter of recommendation to LSAC. There's forms that you fill out. I mean, really good instructions about how to do that. So don't fret about that, because you'll know how to do it. But what was, I totally went blank the other part of the question.
Regarding employers or supervisors.
Yeah. So I think it really depends on where you are, sort of in the stream of things. I mean, and you need to know what your school wants. Some schools want 2 letters or 1 letter from academia. Other schools may say, well, give me 1 letter from academia and then another letter from someone else. You know, having a letter from an employer, I think, is absolutely fine. We get that. And if you have been out of school, maybe if you take a gap year and you've worked, then, you know, maybe a letter from an employer or someone you work with, or if you've been an RA or whatever, those letters, you know, have a lot of value too. So but once again, you need to be familiar with what the school, where you're applying, what their requirements are.
Good. I mean, just echoing that, like letters of recommendation, I've seen some really good ones really help people. So, you know, take some consideration with it too. But, you know, if you don't have good relationships with your faculty members, and you have time, make an effort for them. Go and meet them during office hours if you can, or in these times have to meet with them virtually. I think they're willing to do that. But the more effort you make, I think it can be helpful for you when you get to this point where you're applying to law schools. So if you have time, by all means, make that effort. It will benefit you. You know, some of those challenges for people getting letters of recommendation, if they've been out of school for a while, and, you know, and if they were in a big program where there's, you know, several hundred people in a classroom and the faculty member never got to know them. And I can see that. But again, it's going to be your own individual efforts too. But you can always tell, reading a letter of recommendation, if that person really knows you or not. So don't think that, you know, it has to have this huge title associated with it. I think a really good letter of recommendation can be so well done, but don't give whoever writes your letter, don't just give them carte blanche to write whatever they want. Meet with them, bring your resume, sit down with them, talk about the things that you'd like them to address, how you had matured as a student, if you changed majors, how you excelled in there. Do they know about any internships or clinics or internships or any type of things you did in terms of co-curriculars that could be helpful for you that they know? Did you experience a bunch of challenges, but you still actually rose to the level and your academics didn't slip, because even though, you know, you might have had some personal challenges or something in your family, let them know your circumstances so they can write a really good letter, because we read them. And I always make a note when I'm reviewing files. It's like, oh, really great letter of recommendation. And it says a lot. So it's very telling.
Yeah. Let's see. There were, if you guys are okay with maybe one more question, I've got, let's see, one more that I'd love to share. And it's kind of directly asking in response to something that you noted about credit statements, actually, and a few other questions tied in too. When you're admissions, do you actually look at people's credit history? And in a similar vein, especially with everything going on in the world right now, how would an admissions agent or officer look at, say, someone's arrest record for protesting? What comments do you guys have on that? Darren, do you want to start there?
Yeah, sure. Just quickly, I did make a note here too about social media accounts too. We've actually had a couple of situations where, look, you can think whatever you want, but remember that you are attempting to attend a professional community and joining that. And, people's views are their views, and you can think whatever you want, but sometimes when you start putting things out there, it's available for everyone to see. And, your personas and your, and who you are as a law student is really solidified very quickly. You want to make sure if you're joining a professional community that your reputation and good judgment is all part of that process. I mean, there have been admissions officers this cycle alone that I know of that have revoked admissions based on somebody's statements in social medias and stuff. So all that's available for people to see. Sometimes, I mean, I'm not in the habit of looking at everyone's social media accounts nor credit reports either. I mean, it's really to your benefit to know who you are and where you stand, and if something's on there that shouldn't be. I mean, Jackie did financial aid for 30 years, so she can probably talk about it incessantly. So, but you never know when you need like a graduate plus loan, which is based on a credit worthiness. So you don't want anything on there that could somehow impede you, God forbid, once you're in law school, if you need to increase a financial aid or something like that, and something that could inhibit you from securing that. So no, we don't typically spend hours looking at everyone's like social media or credit reports or otherwise, but just know that, you know, it has that opportunity to raise its head, especially for social media related stuff in our time. So make good decisions, think whatever you want, but once you start putting things out there, it can be a real problem for you down the line.
Thank you.
Jackie, did you want to say anything on that?
Just as it relates to credit, I mean, what you said is absolutely true, and I agree with all of that. The other thing to think about is when you get to that bar application, there are many state bar applications that will ask about credits and, you know, credit issues, bankruptcies, delinquent accounts. They are taking, I think, a little stronger look now than they used to at like indebtedness and that sort of thing. So those are things you want to be aware of and not get caught short. I mean, you don't want to go to law school for 3 years and go to sit for the bar and you're like, oh, you've got, you know, whatever on your record and they're not going to let you do it. So, you know, and regardless of what we think about, you know, how you feel about issues and things like that, I don't know how like state Supreme Court's character and fitness committees are going to look at, you know, certain things. You know, someone asked about protests and that sort of thing. I don't think we have any probably good history on how that is going to play out when it gets to, you know, character and fitness.
Yeah, sure. If you're getting arrested or something like that, I mean, you have to fully disclose it. So think about that. I'm not saying you shouldn't stand up for the things that you believe, and you know, that's just part of being in a democracy. Is people standing up, but, you know, make good decisions. Again, getting back to that, it's like, am I making the best decision? I mean, don't put yourself in a jeopardizing situation. So that's my advice to you there. So was that the last question, Emily, we're going to hit?
Yeah, there are a few others, but I think since we are over time a little bit, I'll just request that our attendees maybe email you guys directly if they have a little bit more.
Okay.
Is there any other like last notes you guys want to leave us with?
Well, the only thing that I would say, oh, sorry, Jackie.
It's okay.
So I just wanted to make sure that everyone realized too, is that this fall is going to be a very different recruiting cycle for you. And normally you have the ability to, you know, join different law fairs, different type of recruitment events where we come to you. And it's not because we don't enjoy building those relationships with you. I know we do. I know that's just one of our strengths. And I know at Charleston and the charm there, they just build relationships. And that's why, you know, a lot of ways you feel like, you know, some of these connections to different cultures of law schools. But knowing that we're sort of entering into this, I know I was talking to Emily with Phi Alpha Delta, so staying involved with them, but also as Phi Alpha Delta members, by all means reach out to your schools or schools that you think some of your members might have an interest in being involved in. We're happy to do these on an individual school. Phi Alpha Delta student organization memberships, we're happy to do those for you. So during your monthly meetings or whenever you have them, I mean, by all means, reach out to individual schools and have a multitude of them. I mean, it's really could be a great way to create dialogue within your own P.A.D groups at your schools, but also to learn things from perspectives of different law school admissions officers that, you know, they can offer advice in different ways. So it's going to be a sort of a collaboration between law school admissions officers and schools and students. So by all means, feel free to reach out. If you wanted to know people at different schools and you don't know how to reach them, I mean, if we can help you, I'm happy to facilitate that too, but we're always happy to speak with your groups, and don't think that you have to do this on your own. We're available for you. Students are a top priority at law schools. If we don't have students, we don't have law schools. So just remember, you matter to us. So by all means, don't hesitate. I mean, most law schools are going to help you and your students.
And I certainly agree with everything, Darren, you just said. Also would encourage you back to the application process. You know, as schools open up and you can go and visit schools, I think it's, you know, especially if there's something in your area that you could go, maybe sit in on a law class or speak with a current student, that sort of thing. And even if those things now will turn into virtual events, I would encourage you to certainly take advantage of those, because It might help you, it might solidify, oh yes, I do want to be in law school, or it may solidify that, oh, I've made a mistake. This is really not what I thought it was going to be like. So take advantage of that if you can, and then I'll put my old financial aid hat on, and make sure you are aware with each school what their scholarship deadlines and what their financial aid process is like. Don't get caught short, but make sure that you're in whatever their deadlines and requirements are for considerations for scholarships and other types of aid, that you're aware of what those processes are, so that you don't miss out on money that could possibly be out there that you could qualify for.
Good. I agree.
That's it. It's great being here today. Thanks for coming.
Yes, thank you all.
Thank you guys so much for helping us out with this webinar. Thank you to all of our attendees for taking time out of your day. I know it's summer vacation, so you guys are taking the opportunity to be here. I did put all three of our contact information in the chat, and we will send you a follow-up email when the video is posted so that you guys can share this if you like. Thank you for your patience with our technical difficulties. It does happen from time to time.
Yes.
I just want to take one final moment just to remind you guys as pre-law students to keep an eye on your emails, because we hope to have more sessions like this for you guys over the summer and as we get into fall to kind of meet some of these virtual needs that we have. And also keep an eye on your emails about this November's pre-law conference. We are hoping we'll be able to do that in person, but we've got some contingency plans if we need to move virtual. So keep an eye. You guys might even be getting an email about that this week, I think, if I've read my communication schedule correctly. So hopefully you guys will be able to join us, and I wish you all the very best of luck. And thank you again, Darren and Jackie, for taking time to do this with us.
Thank you. It was our pleasure.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.